Hi, my name is Iris. Currently, I am part of the in-house staff at the Omni Champions Gate outside Orlando, Florida. I've done a bit of everything from theater to radio, television, live events. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in theater, and my first job was in radio, so you never know where you're going to end up in this. I'm part of this community because I believe in education, and during this time, I believe everyone can improve their knowledge to get more gigs and do more things. Hi, my name is Iris. Currently, I am part of the in-house staff at the Omni Champions Gate outside Orlando, Florida. I've done a bit of everything from theater to radio, television, live events. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in theater, and my first job was in radio, so you never know where you're going to end up in this. I'm part of this community because I believe in education, and during this time, I believe everyone can improve their knowledge to get more gigs and do more things and just be more flexible in the new whatever it is we're going into. But I appreciate you're here. I hope you learned something and have fun watch the show.
Hi, my name is Adam Berlin. I'm originally from Queens, New York, and now I live in Fairfield, Connecticut. My work includes in the AV world is mainly all video, such as video tech, utility, Steadicam, camera op, uh, and projection. Um, I'm well versatile in the video world, as I said. The reason I started this industry is because of music. I'm very, music oriented. I love music a lot, and I got a lot of different visuals. Um, why I enjoy this show is more about the education and spreading the word of how to do things, and spreading my knowledge to others is always enlightening for me, and I'd like to pay back in return. And I hope you guys enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, my name is Disa Cameron. I'm from Ottawa in Canada. I'm an account manager with a company we are fondly calling ourselves One Canada, which is comprised of FMAV, PSAV, and Encore, so the group of companies. I've been with the company since about 2005. I started out as a freelance technician, and then I kind of moved my way up the ladder. And now I'm an account manager, which is consisting mostly of sales, but I do a little bit of the operations side and a lot of hand holding with my clients and really helping them make this transition to virtual and to hybrid. The reason why I am excited to be on this panel tonight and spending time with you is I really feel like there's a huge shift going on in our industry right now. And I think it's really important that we all come together, whether we're competitors or not, from different countries or not. I think it's really important that we all come together, collaborate, share our knowledge, and really try and unify and bring this industry back to where it was at and be even stronger and be even better. So thank you so much. Look forward to tonight's show, and thank you.
AV Tech Talks, House Rules. Join us on AVE Live, Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join us on Zoom. Watch on Facebook or YouTube from the AV Educate page, or register as an attendee for the webinar. Live Q&A. Our guest will lead us through a guided demo and conversation about tonight's topic. We will take your questions and comments throughout the show. Don't wait until the end. Get your questions and comments in early to shape the conversation. We don't know it all. We're human and don't claim to know everything. We may demonstrate or discuss one way to do something, but that doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. If you found another way that is easier or yields better results, please share with the community so we can all learn together. Follow AV Educate. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and have a library of content on YouTube. Join us on Zoom for AV Tech Talks and to become a member of our community on Discord, where the conversations, the learning, and the sharing continues. We are where you are. Place your phone over the QR code to come learn more about AV Educate.
Hey, welcome to AV Tech Talks. Thanks for joining us. We're glad to see you all on Facebook and YouTube and here in the Zoom webinar. So tonight we're talking cameras. I guess how many people on the panel have a camera? That was a rhetorical, silly question. So are we getting the best out of our cameras? Do our cameras look the best? You know, Jeff Widgren, you have a pretty nice looking camera. I know that you've talked about it a bit. What are you using tonight?
I am on a Canon, it's a mirrorless Canon EOS R with a 2470 2.8 L series lens.
Cool. And obviously you have some photography background.
I do.
Yeah. And then Disa, you've talked about your camera before. What are you coming in on today?
Oh, my $30 Logitech webcam.
Right. That's great. And then Greg Gibson, I think you know a thing or two about cameras as well. The mute button is
the audio he's having a problem with.
I was going to say, I know a few things about cameras, but this audio thing just blows my mind.
He admitted that the other night, I think.
For sure. Yeah, audio, that's a whole different animal. But,
this is going to be a fun show, I think. Today's going to be a fun show. Fun show. Cool. So I think that
wait, we didn't get the camera. What kind of camera do you use?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, what kind of camera?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm using a Sony A9 II with a 50 millimeter f1.4 lens on it. So it's all about the bokeh. It's all about the bokeh, dude.
Nice. So no matter how good our cameras are, though, I think everyone's always striving to get that better look on camera, especially now that we're kind of on camera all the time for our main communication, whether it's from work or school or meetings or doing live streams like these. So Lee, we asked Lee Love to come on because he's going to tell us a little bit about getting the most out of our cameras. Omar, before we jump in, you got anything you want to add?
I just want to jump in real quick, and I want to thank some of the people right now. I was putting this in there, and I'm trying to get this going a little bit. But thanks for Miami, Florida for being out here, Ottawa, Ontario, Seattle, Trinidad and Tobago's out here tonight. Thank you for being here. That's all I got for that. But Lee, I'm really interested to hear what you got. Deez, if you got nothing else you want to say and throw in there, I'd love to hear what Lee's got to teach us tonight.
Yeah, I just wanted to do a quick plug that April is Audio Month, so be sure to check out our Facebook event page and RSVP.
And since you brought it up already, I will drop a link to that event page in the Facebook chat right now. And with that, Lee,
Well, thanks,
we had to
guys.
plug audio before we talked anything about video. So
Hey,
go-
listen,
go right ahead.
without audio, it's only, so with audio, it's radio. Without pictures, you're just kind of stuck in the mud there. So, no, I totally get it, and it's a double-edged sword, really. Photography, video, audio. In fact, I see a lot of photographers that transition into doing video, and the biggest problem, they're great at understanding the video part for the most part. They understand composition, lighting, those types of things, but the biggest problem that throws them is audio. So it doesn't surprise me that audio is one of those things. It's a little bit of a weird animal. There's no doubt about it, as I'm sure you'd agree, Ed.
Absolutely, yeah.
Anyway, so I thought tonight, I appreciate you guys asking me to come on. I don't know why. I think you maybe were really scraping the bottom of the barrel, but anyway, I didn't have anything to do anyway, so I'm glad you invited me on anyway on a Monday night. But the thing about photography or video is there's a lot of misconceptions, and I think about what you can do and what you can't do. I think Greg being a photographer, would agree with me that one of the things I like to say is a photographer's job is not to make pretty pictures. That's the medium we deliver in, but I found that my job is really to solve problems. Client comes to you, says, hey, we want this to be doing this, or we need this. Here's our message. Here's what we want you to do. Here's where we want you to go. And when you get there, it's not anywhere like they told you it was going to be, or even if something's changed, the set's changed, equipment breaks, you forgot your battery for something. So it's all about figuring out how to make things work given what you have. And I think that's a good theme for us to remember tonight, is that no matter if you have a $30 webcam or, a $3,000, $4,000 camera, it's still about how to make it work with what you have. And there's ways you can do that. I think that's what makes a difference between a good photographer and an adequate photographer or mediocre photographer. Is not about, oh, I don't have this lens, I don't have that. There's a lot of excuses you can make, but it's not about that. It's about using what you have and using your expertise to solve a problem. So that's kind of stuff I'm going to talk a little bit about tonight. Go over some of the basics of connecting your camera to your computer and being able to use it as a webcam. But then I'm going to dive into some of the art aspect of it, some of the things that we're trying to, why are you doing what you're doing? Why do you want a blurry background? What's the purpose of that? And so anyway, so I've narrowed it down to 374 slides. I think if I go a second each, we should get done in 2 hours. So
yeah, just go with a 1 FPS. That's fine.
Exactly. I'll just let it run at 30 frames a second, and then we'll be done really quickly. So this is what I look like before 3 hours of makeup and hair. And, that's really what it's all about is, trying to make yourself look as best you can on camera, given the tools that we have to work with, as I said. The first thing I'm going to start with is kind of some basics. And I know you guys know this. This is a very smart panel. It's not like this stuff is new, but there may be some people that are watching that aren't familiar with this. But most cameras nowadays have two kind of outputs: an HDMI output, which is typically was originally set up to go to a TV or something, and then a USB output, which was used for downloading images to your computer. And now there's been some changes where you're able to use both of these, and I'll talk just very briefly about that. But so the first one is the USB output. Now, this is relatively new within, I'd say, the last year and a half or 2 years since the pandemic. What's happened is these Nikon, Canon, Sony, Panasonic have all come up with software that lets you use your USB output to interface to your computer to do web streaming and to act as a webcam. Now, the problem with this, though, well, the advantage is there's no interface needed. You just plug in a USB and you're ready to go. The problem is there's a limited support, and the video quality is not as good if you're doing HDMI. So a lot of them are limited to some weird frame rates, or not frame rates, but weird aspect ratios and resolutions. And so I know there's some software, like if you're a vMix user, for example, I've known people that can't use this model because it don't support like 751 by whatever the resolution is. So anyway, so it's a great concept, but the cameras were never designed to be able to spit video out of a USB port. They're meant to be downloading images, and so the processors and the technology inside was never really meant to do that. But it is possible. So it's a good way to get started. If you have a camera, you got to look into that. Like I said, there's a lot of companies that now have software that's free that you can download that'll let you use a USB port. The more, again, the three things that you want to look for when you're talking about using a camera, DSLR, or when I say DSLR, I'm referring to mirrorless as well. I kind of use them interchangeably. Again, there are kind of three things you want to make sure that the camera will support. Number one, an interface, as I've kind of touched on. The second one are the power requirements, and then the third one is this timeout problem I'm going to address. So again, the HDMI is really the best way to go if you can support that, because it's 4K. Many of them will go up to 4K, not that you're streaming 4K, but at least higher quality. It does require an interface to go from HDMI to USB or to some other interface capability. So there's an added cost there, but those are coming down as well. But the video quality is much, much better. So if you can come out HDMI into your computer using an interface, you're always going to be better off. Now, one of the things that there's a myth that people don't realize, a lot of cameras are limited to 29 minutes and 59 seconds. And the camera will only record that, or some of them will only stay in what's called live view that long. And a lot of people thought it was overheating or sensors or battery life. It's none of those things. The reason is it's the same reason that they limit the amount of cinnamon you can put on a Danish pastry, and that is it's regulated by the European Union Trade Group. And so what they do is they tax cameras that can record over 30 minutes higher than a regular camera. So a video camera has a higher tax rate on it than a still camera. So manufacturers, to keep the price down on their cameras, limited that capability. So it's not typically a technical issue, although sometimes there can be, but for the most part. So this is the other thing you want to watch out for. Can the camera support and record or play, or at least be able to run more than 29 minutes and 59 seconds without timing out? Again, the third thing you want to look for is a clean HDMI. Now, again, older cameras are great, but what they do is they put the menus on that HDMI port. They're expecting you to be playing this on a TV. They weren't expecting us to be streaming this thing. So you want to make sure that you have a camera that can turn those menus off and give what's called a clean HDMI out of that port. And again, it usually runs in what's called a live view. Now, you don't have to have a DSLR. There's a lot of other options, believe it or not, that will improve the quality of your video. The first one is a camcorder. Camcorders are inexpensive. They really have pretty good quality. A lot of them are 4K, or definitely all of them are 1080. They have a clean HDMI output. They don't have the record limit. They don't have any of the problems that you see with a DSLR, except that they are a smaller sensor, but they typically have a built-in zoom, which is pretty nice. And so, I wouldn't, and they're inexpensive. A couple $100 you can get a really nice camcorder. I actually have two of them. One of them I use overhead to aim down for doing tutorials and stuff like that. So you can also use your smartphone, believe it or not. So if you have a smartphone, now they've come out with a lot of software that will use a USB port to connect to your computer. Once again, not requiring a interface. So that's always a nice thing. And the quality, especially on, I don't know about the Google or the Android phones, but on the Apple phone, the camera, the outbound facing camera is really good quality, higher resolution. And so there's nothing wrong with that. There's a couple of software systems, Epoch and IV Cam, that will let you run, use a USB port. I think some of them will even use Wi-Fi with very little lag, believe it or not. And of course, the third way is to interface, use the Lightning connector if you have an iPhone to HDMI, and then make that look just like a regular camcorder or a DSLR would. And then, of course, there's the HDI that runs the software. So there's a lot of options there that will get you a much better quality than a webcam, and also give you the ability to give a better field of view. So anyway. The third thing to look out for is battery. So again, you want to try and find a way to power your camera so it's not shutting off. You don't have to go replace batteries. That's a pain in the butt. So you want something that's called a battery eliminator. Now this works in a couple of different ways. One method is it replaces the battery in the camera, and then you connect it to a external power supply. The other one is that some of the newer cameras will work where they can be powered. At least some of them can be powered, some of them can be charged, the battery, while you're using it through a USB port. Okay, so before I go any further, any questions, comments on kind of the things I've touched on so far? Nope, I guess not. Okay. You guys, I'm sure someone's there listening watching for questions or something like that.
We
No,
are, yeah.
we're all asleep at the wheel.
Okay, well, me too. I'm just running on autopilot, so it works out perfectly. Luckily I have one of those devices that will control the speed if someone's in front of me. So.
Now, Lee, you know what? I did forget. You and I talked about last night doing a little fun experiment.
Yes.
So I have something to ask of our audience and of our panelists. So before Lee kind of gets into some of these tips and tricks for improving our look, it would be kind of cool if everybody who's watching take a screenshot of what your camera looks like now. Just however you can, just take a quick screenshot of what you look like on your camera. And then after this episode, when you've applied some of these tricks that maybe you learned tonight, take another picture and then join our Discord and post those pictures in the channel for this episode. That way we can see some before and afters to see, to show some of the improvements that maybe we've made. So I'm really looking forward to Greg Gibson's before and afters, because that guy could use a little bit of.
I think he needs a soft focus filter, but that's.
You may want to put the Brad Pitt filter up, the Brad Pitt filter in Photoshop.
Yeah.
So yeah, that'd be great if everybody does that. We'll get that link to join our Discord. We do have a Discord channel where we continue the conversations, and you can jump in there, and then we'll check out your before and after photos. I think it'll be a fun little experiment. So I want everybody on the panel too to do this. You guys are our ambassadors for this little exercise. So go ahead, Lee.
So one of the questions that, it's great that we talk about all this technology, and you got to have this lens, and you got to have that camera, and you got to spend all this money. But the question I always go back to is why? Why are you okay, well, you want your picture to look better. Okay, I get that part. But what's the purpose? As a photographer, everything you do, and as a filmmaker as well, everything you do has a purpose. It's not just because it's cool or because you can do it. It tells a story. That's what we are as photographers and filmmakers. We are storytellers. So when you look at something like a photo and you're saying, "Oh, I need that blurry background," because it's cool. The purpose of having a background that's slightly out of focus can be a couple of things. Number one, it can be used to put the focus on the subject to make them stand out more in the frame. It could be used to tell a subtle story. Now, if you look at my picture, let's say versus Greg's picture, okay, I still have a shallow depth of field, but you can still see some of the stuff behind me. You can still see what those objects are. With Greg's system at the 1.4, because the aperture is so wide, it really throws that out of background. That's not a good or bad thing. It's not a criticism. It's just that there's a difference there. And so you would use those tools as a storytelling tool to be able to tell, or to use those to reinforce a story or to sell something in the background. So if you watch a lot of film, for example, they rarely use super out of focus, shallow depth of field. They want that background to be in focus somewhat, and subtly and in the background to help reinforce that story. So I'll give you we'll talk a little bit about that now. I'll kind of give you some examples of how that works.
Hey, Lee,
yeah.
can I just jump in real quick?
Sure, go right ahead, Greg.
For example, one thing, with the shallow depth of field, I don't necessarily want to have a lot of detail in the background, because if I move out of the way, and you start to see my background, well, you can see I just really sort of have this kind of plain room in the background, and there's a treadmill. There's a treadmill back there behind me when it's in focus. But if I get up here close and I use the depth of field on the camera, it knocks all that out of focus, and it takes away a lot of the clutter and distraction that's in the background.
Yes, and it also because the depth of field is so shallow, it also makes it very creamy and colorful looking. So it wouldn't matter what's back there; it really enhances and gives. But the main thing is it creates depth in Greg's picture, which is what you want, what he's going for there. He wants depth to separate himself from the background, and he's also trying to disguise a little bit of the background so it's not as clear. You wouldn't. It's a great point, Greg, because you wouldn't want a f/22 kind of aperture on something like that because it would show that. So that's an excellent point.
Well, aren't we also at times trying to bring focus to the subject, and so letting the background become less of a distraction, which you've said, but for the very purpose of bringing focus to Greg or focus to yourself on camera, especially these days when we're online and we're presenting ourselves. I mean, I think of it as, our new 3-piece suit is the camera, the lights, and the audio. I mean, and so it's a vital piece of our presentation.
Absolutely. The trick though is, what if you don't have a lens that's a 1.4, or you don't have, so there are more than one way to get that look, or to separate yourself from the background other than aperture. And I think what's the myth, or not the myth, the problem is people assume that's the only way to do it. So they mean, I got to have this lens. Now here's the problem with that, by the way. If you have a really shallow depth of field, guess what? I'm now out of focus. So it's not just, so you got to be careful. There's a downside. Everything in photography is a compromise, I should mention.
Well, but you're on manual focus if that's happening, to
right.
make the point, right?
But that's right. But still,
I'm on autofocus, and that won't happen to my.
Right, but that also is going to change your depth of field and what's going to happen. So if you move back, the background's going to become more in focus as well. So it's going to track with you. So that's the point is, it's great that you can do a shallow depth of field. It's nice that you can have a really open a lens with a wide aperture, but there's more than one way to be able to achieve the whole point of telling a story, or to be able to separate yourself from the background. So let's talk for a second about what I call learning to speak art. Now, what I don't think many of us realize is there's a lot of things that happen that are subconscious. So in other words, depth of field is an example, or lines, or shape, or form, or space, or texture, or value, or color. All these things have something to say. They're elements, they're very similar to if you were looking at a language, if you're trying to learn English or Spanish or something, the noun, verb, preposition, adjective, there's all these things that you use to communicate in a verbal language or in a written language. It's the same thing with photography or art. All of these things have meaning, and they all communicate something. So if you learn the language, you can better make you can use these tools to improve your image of your camera. So in other words, maybe the color you pick is not the right color depending on what kind of business you're in or what you're trying to do. People that are designers, graphic designers, know this very, very well. When they're trying to design a logo, they understand that round shapes have different meanings than square shapes and things like that. So what I'm trying to get across here is there's a lot more to this than just throwing your background out of focus or trying to make it look cool. There's a lot of other elements that come into play that will communicate your intent. And I think that's probably the key word, intent, is what are you trying to say, and not just be willy-nilly about it, because I don't think many of us understand that. So what we're really doing here is we're kind of tricking the brain, because you got to remember, we're photographing a three-dimensional world, and we're trying to represent it in a two-dimensional medium. So that means that's why the depth of field works, because the brain sees that and says, oh, okay, that's out of focus. That must mean it's further away than in the background, because that's the way the brain works, okay? But there's other things that you can use to do the same thing. One would be physical space. In other words, if you move your background further away, you will get a shallower depth of field. Now, the problem is a lot of us in our home offices don't have a lot of room, but that's one of the techniques that can be used. Depth of field's another one. Lighting is another one. And I'm going to talk a little more about that in more detail. Color, which color your background is it white, black, red, green, blue? What's the color, and how does that affect the perception of the people viewing you? And then, of course, the perspective, what angle the camera's at. Is it too high, too low, at left, right, that type of thing. So, again, kind of like going back down, diving back down to the physical stuff, which most of us look at and say, oh, I got to get a lens. Which lens should I get? I see this over and over and over again. People asking, what lens should I buy? What lens should I buy if I'm looking for this kind of look? The problem is it very much depends on what you're going to be doing with it. A wide angle lens would not be the lens I would typically use if I'm a sports photographer. Or a normal lens is typically called a 50 millimeter lens. It's about a 50 millimeter lens is about the field of view that the human eye can see on most cameras, and that's why it's called a normal lens. A telephoto obviously is going to give you a narrower field of view, and so therefore it's going to bring things. It's going to look like it's bringing things. It's going to also have some magnification, but the main thing, it's the field of view that changes. So depending on what you're trying to accomplish, would depend on what lens you're going to select. So it's not as simple as saying, oh, I just need a f1.4 or I need, a wide angle lens or telephoto lens, because each one is going to have a different characteristic. Also, one thing you may not realize is that an f1.4 on a 50 millimeter lens is not the same amount of light as an f1.4 on a 85 millimeter lens. So the aperture varies based on the amount of light it lets through, is based on the lens, on the focal length of the lens. Okay, so let's look. So here's an example. So here's a 50 millimeter f1.8. So it's got nice blurry background in the middle picture. At f11, it's got you can see still some of the background in there. And at f22, almost everything's in focus. So aperture is important, but it's not the only thing. It's also, there's other attributes such as focal length I'm going to talk about. But again, f1.8 is, a shallow depth of field, but it also means your focus is much more critical. Now, Jeff mentioned autofocus, and autofocus is terrific when it works. And, some of them are better than others and that type of thing. And but that also has to do with lighting and how well it tracks. But it's also more prone to mistakes. So the narrower or the more shallow the depth of field, the more likely you can miss focus. So I see a lot of pictures, a lot of people have problems with, they're told, oh, what lens should I get for portraits? Oh, I need a 50 millimeter 1.8. They go out and buy a 50 millimeter 1.8, and then they're photographing a group, and what they find out is the people in the front of the group are in sharp, but the people in the back of the group are out of focus, because they don't realize that the depth of field is not just about throwing the background out of focus. There's many times you can get a person's nose in focus and eye can be out of focus if you're using too wide of an aperture, depending on the camera and a lot of other variables. So depth of field is important, but you got to be careful. There's a lot of calculators that will go and let you show you how much depth of field you're going to get. And it's important to understand that. But depth of field is also not just determined by aperture. It's also determined by focal length and by distance. So if you look at, this is the camera is all shot with the same aperture, but here's a camera at 35 millimeter, 70 millimeter, 150 millimeter, and 200 millimeter. So you can see that with a 200 millimeter, the depth of field is much, much shallower than that of a 35 millimeter, even though it's shot with the same aperture. So it's not just about aperture. Focal length has a big bearing on that. So if you're in a situation where you're limited in the lens that you have, maybe you have a kit lens that came with the camera, it's a 3.5 or 4.5 or whatever. If you're able to back up move the camera further back and zoom in. Don't shoot at 18 millimeter, shoot at 55 millimeter. And what you'll do is you'll get a shallower depth of field with that same lens, even though it doesn't have an f1.18 or some super wide aperture. Whoops. Okay. So again, the other thing is distance. So as I mentioned before, but lighting is the key. Lighting is really where things start to get interesting. And lighting is kind of I'm obsessed with lighting. And I can't even watch a TV show or a movie anymore because I'm so sucked into watching the lighting. But there are a couple of things that you need to know about lighting that also come into play when you're trying to improve your studio, or if you're into photography, improve your photos. The first one is direction of light, the size of the light source, and the color temperature of the light. So what a lot of people don't realize is that to create depth, you really are talking about what's called specular highlights or shadows. In other words, if you're lighting a black object, solid black object, the only thing that gives that subject depth is what's referred to as the specular highlight, the reflection of the light on that black surface. But if you're trying to light a lighter colored surface, like a white cue ball or something, the only thing that gives its shape is shadow. So you want to be able to be aware of these things so you can use this as a tool to help construct the image that you're looking for and figure out how to photograph or how to set up your camera. So this is the same two objects, okay? Just except not against a gray background, so you can see the definition, and you can see that the really thing only gives them shape are the specular highlights on one and the shadow on the other. Now, the other thing that's interesting is, and I use this as an example, there's a myth that a lot of people that are not familiar with photography, they think, oh, I got to get a big soft box and it's got to be this super nice soft material in front of it and it's got all this diffusion. That is true. That does help. I'm going to give some examples of that. But the diffusion material that you shine a light through doesn't make the light soft per se. I know that doesn't make sense. I know it's like, wait a minute, the nice soft material should make it softer. That's not really the way it works. What happens though is this material, soft material, changes the characteristic of that specular highlight. In other words, a nice soft material diffused light will make that shiny spot on the 8 ball on the left more diffused, but it doesn't really make it softer. What makes an object softer is the light source, the size of the light source. Now, we've all seen this before. Ring lights, everybody, it seems nowadays everybody uses these ring lights for webcams and stuff like that. Personally, I think they're the worst thing in the world. Maybe they're great if you're putting on makeup, but they're not very good if you're using them for photography and the reason is because, let's see if I have another slide here. Nope, I don't have it there. So number one, they give you these alien looks in your eyes. So if you have glasses, it's especially difficult, but it also makes everything flat looking. Okay, and I think one of the keys is you don't want anything flat looking. You want something that's got some shape to it. A big light source right in the middle of your camera right there is nice. It'll light everything up. And again, I've done some things like that. If I'm trying to hide some skin structure or something like that, that makes sense. But it just doesn't have any dimension to it. You want to have a little bit of light on each side. So now I'll just kind of show you. So on my system right here, okay, there is my key light. That's one light I have on, and there's the fill light. So the fill light gives some light, but it's not lighting the whole face evenly. So this is going to have the shadow side. This is going to have the highlight side. And that's my style. I like having to be able to create structure in the face because that's what gives the object or the face or whatever you're photographing dimension. Without shadow, there's no dimension. It's just all, again, back to what we were talking about before, in that everything looks flat if there's no dimension to it, if there's no way if you don't able to use the shadow or the specular highlight to create dimension in your photo. So anyway, we've all seen this ring light, as I said before. This is one way of going, but it's a little flat. In fact, that's why they're used for makeup mirrors. I mean, if you look at a makeup mirror, it has bulbs all around it, and the reason is it hides the shadows. There are no shadows, and that's so you can tell how the makeup's if it's even or not, that type of thing. Now,
Lee, do you mind if I jump in one second?
Go right ahead.
So the points you make about the shadows and highlights, creating depth and dimension in the image, I think is really important. In fact, one of the things I used to talk about quite a bit when I spoke about photography was I'm going to give you guys, I'm going to tell you guys what I think the secret sauce of photography really is. So I want everybody to lean in really close, get really close to your speakers, because I'm going to tell you the true secret of photography. Everybody ready? So the secret is placement of highlights. So having the ability to place the highlights in areas that you want emphasis in is what is going to make your images more compelling. And so it kind of goes along with what Lee's saying. So highlights are really just bright spots in the image. And so when you look at an image, your eye is always attracted to the brightest part of that image. So that's why placement of a highlight is so important. So for example, when I light myself brighter than the background, even though I have some kind of light colored monitors back here. So hopefully when you look at my image, the first thing that you look at is you see my face, and then everything else kind of falls to the side. And so, I think those things are really important. And I do think that placement of highlights is a real powerful tool in your arsenal.
And I totally agree. When you do corporate headshots, a lot of times they will say, oh, we want to shoot it on a white background because it's going on our website. The reason I try and talk them out of that, or I don't particularly like doing that, is because the light, like you said, the lighter the subject or the light, the human eye is drawn to the lightest part of an image. So if the background is white and you're lit, then your brain is having trouble deciding on what's the most important thing. Our job as a photographer is to guide the viewer. You want the viewer to look where you want them to look, and you use all the tools I'm talking about to guide them. You don't want them wandering around the frame going, oh, what's this? Is that important? Oh, that's this tree. What am I supposed to look at here? You want them to look, and that's exactly what Greg is saying, is by crafting the light and making the highlights where you want them to go and the darkest part areas, the eye will just ignore the dark part and immediately go to the lightest part of the frame. Good point, Greg. Thanks very much. Okay, so again, back to the point about your lighting. This is probably pretty difficult to see on video, but basically, what makes a light softer or harder is the size of the light in relationship to the subject, not the material. What Greg was saying is the specular highlight, or the highlights of you put on the face, will be adjusted or determined by the material, or by the light modifier technically, but it's the size of the light in relationship to the subject that makes it soft. So if you take a person and you have this, and that's why they have soft boxes, giant soft boxes, and you put that thing a foot or two away from the person just out of camera range, you're going to get a nice soft gradation of light on their face. It's going to fall off very slowly, and it's going to look very flattering, again, depending on the subject that you're photographing. Typically this would be really nice for a female. But so that's what determines whether the light is soft or not the material. But if you're trying to photograph something and you want a more hard light, a more dramatic light, again, kind of going back what Greg was talking about, if you look at this one, this doesn't have much of a specular highlight. It's kind of a flat-looking light across the face. But yet this one here is a little harder. You got more of a dramatic fall-off in the light. That's based on the fact that you have a smaller light source. So you can either take a large light source and back it up, but typically you would use a small light source. That's why these little LED panels that people put on their cameras or computers are not very flattering, because they're so small that they create shadows and are not very flattering. So if anything, you can take any light and bounce it through something, a piece of material, or even take a piece of white foam core and you can take some piece of white foam core and bounce that light into that, and then use that, instead of aiming the light at your face, turn it around, aim it at a piece of foam core. So now what happens is the light is effectively much, much larger, and therefore it's going to be softer.
And Lee, sorry, just along with
So
that.
go ahead, jump in anytime, Greg.
No, along with that, like just trying to keep it real and make it useful for people who are just kind of try to do this stuff at home that aren't professionals. I mean, having a piece of foam core and putting that on your wall is great, but let's say you're just using a webcam on your computer. And, a lot of times people will come in and take a desk lamp or something, and they'll put a desk lamp behind their computer, and they'll shine that desk lamp like right on their face. But actually, if you turn that desk lamp around and bounce it off the wall, if it's a light color, it's going to be a much softer light source than it is if you just shine it directly on you. The one thing you have to be careful of, though, is walls that have a lot of color in them, because if it's a colored wall, it's also going to reflect that color of light back on your face. So if you've got sort of a light colored neutral wall, it's a great to just take like a regular desk lamp and just turn it away from the computer, bounce it off the wall, and get a nice broad indirect source of light.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend a green wall. Bouncing it off a green wall would not be that's not very flattering to the skin tone. So unless you're doing chroma key, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, good point. Now, by doing that, it's going to make it softer, but it's also going to make it broader. It's also going to make it a little flatter looking, but it will still give you a much better look than if you're just trying to aim that light right at you. Go ahead, Ed. Do you want to say something?
Oh, well, to Greg's point, the other day, I have a couple lights here that are, I bought some 5200K, 52K lights so that when I have a window open, I didn't have too different of a light, white balance. And the other day I was doing an event, and I didn't realize that I had my overhead light above me. And, my lights here are pointed right at me on either side, and then I've got my key lights on my green screen. But that overhead light, one of them was pointing at my wall, and my wall back here is red. And I couldn't understand why my face looked so flushed, so red all day. And I'm like, man, why? I started playing with the white balance in my camera settings. I can't get it right. I'm like, what's going on? This is like, it's the same camera I use every day in the same position. And then I get up at the end of the event and I turn my lights off and I realize, why is there still light? And I look up and I'm like, oops, and those are also 52K lights that are above me. It's in like a ceiling fan kind of thing, but one of them points right at this red wall that was bouncing right on my face, and it made all the difference in the world.
And one of the things that works about your setup, Ed, is it gives it depth. Even though it's a green screen, your background has perspective to it. So it looks very much, it gives it depth. It's not just that the things are further away. It looks further away. It looks, I've had to ask you before,
right?
Is that real or not? Because it looks really, really good. And it's lit almost the same color temperature as your lighting, so therefore it looks very close, and that's the key to making it look good.
Yeah, that's just lucky. That was a phone picture I took of that studio that I built, and when I noticed that, I actually looked at it and said, is this going to look ridiculous? Like, is it going to look like, if it would have been a higher angle aiming down at that console or something else, if it wasn't from the back of the room, it wouldn't have worked perspective wise. So yeah, it was a happy accident, but it was, I'm not that talented.
Hey, listen, as photographers, we all have happy accidents, believe me, and we take them when we can get them because they're few and far between, right, Greg?
I always said I'd rather be lucky than good. So.
Oh yeah, believe me, I can't tell you. It goes back to that thing I was saying about solving problems. You get on set and there's something that's just not working, and you're like, oh my gosh, and then you turn around and you look, oh wow, I can use this. And you pull this over, and that's better than the idea you came in the door with. So you just have to be open to that. So, yep, happy accidents are good. All right. So
Lee, I don't want to interrupt you, but I do want to remind our audience that we questions. If you have questions on Facebook or on YouTube, put them in the comments. If you have questions here in Zoom, use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Let's ask these questions for Lee, for Greg, for anyone on the panel. We'd love to take some questions. From you guys. We want to know what you want to know. What kind of things are you interested in? Otherwise, I think, Lee, you've just been doing such a great job of explaining everything that everyone is either, jaws wide open at all this information, or you're just doing such a great job that they don't have the questions. But I know somebody's got a question, so let's get them in sooner than later. We're almost at the first hour. So
Jeff's got a question there.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of discussions with people about, setups, for their webcams, and I was just having a discussion, I think, with somebody from Belgium yesterday that considering either a camcorder or but he was really digging on the DSLR. And I'll just say most there's so much that can be accomplished without a DSLR in the webcam space, if you will, for the online presentation. Because the DSLR is never going to be your budget choice. A decent DSLR or a mirrorless, and because it just starts there. That's just the body at $2,000 to $4,000, and for a good quality one, and then the lens on top of that, which can be $2,000 to $2,000, $2,500. It's not going to be your budget. Most people that I know that have a DSLR or mirrorless type setup are photographers who had them. And they decided, hey, I've already got this. It'll put out a great image. So, plug in the HDMI out and plumb it into my my PC. That's probably the most common audience I find. But it's a super common question, like, should I go get? And I'm like, gosh, if I didn't have one, I wouldn't go buy one. Yeah, I mean, there's just too many other good choices, whether it's a Canon Handycam or a Logitech Brio, or there's just several other choices that can produce some good results for the online presentation versus photography. Categorically, they're two different categories, but for the online presence, I don't know what your conversations are like, Lee and Greg and others, but that's mine.
Well, I think I agree with you. I agree with you, Jeff. And I think the two drawbacks of webcams I see is not so much the resolution, because we're not streaming 4K or anything like that. But the biggest issue I see are number one, the field of view. They're so wide that they're kind of meant for conferencing, and so therefore they show, in my opinion, they show too much of the room. And if you get closer to them, then you get distortion. So that's why you want a longer lens. A longer lens will compress the facial features, and it makes it look more flattering. And so that's the first thing I see. I just think the field of view is too wide. The second thing I've noticed is they don't handle what's called lighting ratio very well, but the difference between blacks and the darkest part and the whitest part. So the face gets, if you have a dark background, which Greg and I are saying is really ideal, then what happens is it brings up the exposure and the face is all washed out. So it doesn't have a great sense of understanding of the lighting. That's the only drawback. But as far as quality, I've seen some that look really, really good if you get them set up right.
I mean, I'm using a Brio webcam right now.
Yours looks pretty darn good. I would have never guessed that.
Yeah. And
you must be using Zoom filters or something.
Nope. Nope. What's interesting about what you just said, though, so there are camera settings that this particular webcam has, and I found, it's a 4K webcam, so that you can do, you can pan and tilt within your image if you zoom in. So I actually use it on the wide screen, the wider setting, and then I push in just one notch because that's my green screen doesn't really fit. I think I see the edge of my, I like just fit into the frame of how big my green screen is with the depth that I have, and that's what I find it kind of looks the best. I could go to a narrower field, but it didn't look as good. So I don't know. Maybe I'm gonna have to have you maybe one day remote into my camera settings and show me some stuff, Lee, because maybe I'm doing it wrong.
No, it looks good. I mean, if it looks good, you can't be doing it wrong.
Yeah, the other thing with the webcams too, the issue is just the everything's in focus. I mean, the depth of field on them is just, they're small sensors to begin with, so you're going to get more inherent depth of field, and so just everything's in focus from front to back. Yeah, I was going to say, Ed, the nice thing about the Brios are about a $200 camera. Actually, I think I saw them on Amazon for like $179, which is crazy because those things, you couldn't find those things for like the last 6 months. And if you did, they were, $200 or $300. They were way marked up. And also the Huddle cams are really nice cameras. And I think DVE Store sells those as well. And what's nice about the Huddle cams is they actually come with a remote control. that so you can actually zoom. You can actually use the remote control to zoom the lens right on screen. It works really well.
Yeah, that's I bought this Brio last year during Zoomtopia. I played one of their, like, they gamified something and I got a discount on it. In hindsight, the Huddle Cam is one of the ones I kind of wish I had gotten for, the remote, like you said, but also they have one that has a HDMI out on it. So it's a little more expensive, but you kind of get what you pay for. I'm not unhappy with this camera, but those kinds of features would have been nice icing on the cake, if you will. So
Does
Lee,
Jeff have his hand up, or is he just give me a high five?
Well, I was going to say something. I was just waiting for it to pause a little moment. I actually have the other version of the Huddle Cam. Basically, they bring in stuff and rebrand it, so it's Chinese stuff. I have the original OEM, or one of the versions, the Conftel, and I can't stand it. It's I use it, but we talk about a wide lens. It's like this. And so it does have that 4K PTZ, but because you're using a 4K chip that already is this big, and then you're zooming in and trying to do the ePTZ on it, it just doesn't have as good a picture as I'd like it to have. It's a get by, but that's it.
What are you using now, Jeff? What kind of camera are you using now?
This is actually a 1-inch chip and a Bolin. Bolin is a OEM manufacturer for the bird dog cameras, and it's a box camera. It actually is, I've been really happy with it for the most part. I lost my remote to it, so I'm probably a little bit out of focus.
No, you're fine. That sucks though, losing the remote. Believe me, I understand.
It has like a knob on the backside. So anytime I'm setting up, which I did earlier last week for an office hours things, and so I had to get my guys to sit here with me, and I was talking them through the menu and stuff. It's just a pain. But the camera itself is pretty decent but it is a $3,000 camera. It's not cheap. It is a 4K camera.
I'll say that there is a little bit of irony of Jeff Keithley losing a remote. I don't know. Something about that. It's just hilarious.
It got lost somewhere into the cloud, I think.
No, honestly, we really don't know where it is. The camera got loaned out to my church, and I think it may have got left in there or in a car or something. It's like the size of a credit card. So it's not like a full-size remote or anything. But anyway, that's why it's driving me insane is if you look at my white balance is, well, actually I kind of match Disa, but she's from Canada because she's probably always that pale white. I'm not usually. I've actually got a little bit of color to me, but the lights and the white balance I have on this camera is just terrible. I hate it. I'm working.
Well, that's a perfect segue then, because I was going to talk about color temperature and really what that is. And I don't want to get geeky on you guys, but more so than I probably already have. But, when you hear people like Jeff or Ed was talking about 5600, what does that mean? So this is kind of a chart that shows you color temperature, and it's measured in Kelvin, and that's not Kelvin Klein. That's Kelvin. But like a candle or like the incandescent lights that we're used to running in our homes and things like that for years, they're like 3,200 degrees Kelvin. They're nice warm temperature color to them. In fact, nowadays you buy LEDs. I know when I look for something for the house and I'm replacing those, I want something that still has that warm look to it. I don't really want something that's too cool in daylight balance, but that would be somewhere in the 5,600 to 6,400 Kelvin. So the reason I even bring this up, though, is not to get you into understanding color temperature, but to how it's used to represent or to show you what effect it has. So this is and this is going to be different a little bit on different culture, but if you look at the colors and a color wheel, that's, again, if you're a designer, you understand this intimately. Certain colors denote certain things or kind of have a subconscious feeling to them. Blue, again, tends to have more of a trusting color to you. Orange shows energy. Green is growth, of course, that makes sense. But over on the right, if you looked at the color wheel, there's some arrows there. And one of the ones you'll notice is orange and blue, and those are opposite. Those are called complementary colors. Although they're opposite, they're still called complementary colors. And those two colors are used a lot to in photography and in design to kind of complement each other. And again, they play off each other really, really well, and they make each one stand out. Same with red and green. Those are opposite colors. So by using or by learning how these colors work, you can change your color background to maybe, create a certain kind of image that you're looking for, a certain kind of subconscious level that you're looking for. And so that's another way you can improve your webcam color, just by changing the lighting or by having some different lighting back there. Now, I've seen a lot of people will use like reds and things like that, and that's fine. But if it's not, I find that my eye is drawn more toward red than it is toward blue or something like that. So therefore I tend to look at I think the background, like Greg and I were talking about before, with lighter colors or lighter backgrounds draws your eye. So you don't want to draw the eye away. You want the eye to be to the person, to your subject matter. And so not only do you want that background to be a little bit darker, but you also want to consider what the color tone or color temperature of that light should be as well.
Hey, Lee.
Yes, sir.
Well, here's a prime example for me, the way I'm looking. I mean, I'm using daylight in front of me, and my background is like pretty, it's a brown with with white in the background, so I'm kind of like stand out.
Well, I noticed you have Adam, you have a light on I guess it would be on camera right, okay? And that throws some light in the background. Mm-hmm. But, it'd be nice maybe to turn that down a little bit, or if you could control it, see what that looks like. But,
With the bounce you're talking about in the back?
Yeah, that one there.
Bring it down?
Turn it down. Can you turn it? Can you turn it off for a second? Okay, so yeah, that's not going to work, but it's close. But see, if you change that, if you move that around somewhere and you change it so it wasn't quite so bright, then it would still give you some light on the background, but you wouldn't compete with the light you have on your camera.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a stand, but
or if you change the color temperature of that light, if you put a gel over it or something like that, then that would also tone it down.
About, right? The back
yeah,
one?
Right.
I would suggest maybe taking that light and putting it on the floor behind your chair.
Yeah.
Because the way that you had it, where it was up on the wall so that you could kind of see it in the frame, I found it was a little distracting, because when we're talking about that highlight placement, when I looked at your image, the first thing my eye went to was that spot on the wall where that light was hitting. So like Lee was saying, I would filter that down. I would maybe put some kind of, it's not a bad idea to have some little highlight in the background, but I would put like a little neutral density or some kind of a colored gel on it, and then place it somewhere so that it's, you're not seeing it in the frame, and it's just about like a more of an accent than really like hit you in the face with it.
Yeah, I might have to get like a little, small little light to face up. I know what you meant.
Yep.
But I'm just compromising whatever, like household lights. So,
well, we're all making do with what you have, and so there's nothing wrong with that. But it's nice. There's small changes you can make that would make a big difference.
Like if you look behind me, if you see sort of the blue glow on the doors, that's another light, that's just a small light that's sitting on a desk behind those computer monitors with a blue gel on it. And then in the other room, there's another light in there that's got an orange gel on it. And so it's just a way of like adding a little colored accent to the background, but it's not overpowering the image, and it's more like a subtle enhancement than really like just hitting you in the face with it.
And if you look at it, those colors are exactly what I'm talking about here. The blue and the orange are complementary colors, so they really work together. If it was blue and purple or yellow and something else, it might not look as good, but because they're complementary colors, it really works for Greg.
And see, I saw Lee's presentation in advance, so I planned by that. That was all planned out. we had that scripted.
Yeah, like he hasn't never done this before. Give me a break.
I didn't even think about orange and blue being complementary colors. So again, I'd rather be lucky than good.
Lee, you have orange and blue in your background pretty much.
Yeah, I do. So the blue LEDs back there are lighting that background. They're lower color. They're not just blue, but they're also low wattage. I've got them turned down so it doesn't distract too much. But I've got a lot of photography equipment back there. I kind of wanted that to be part of the story because I teach photography. And so I wanted that to be part of it, but I didn't want it to be distracting. And then, of course, the lighting that I have here are just this one is a regular, I think, 5600, and this one is, I've got dialed down to about 3200 to give a little bit of different skin tone. So, and then, but I'm way over the top. I mean, I'm equivalent to Greg. Greg's the streaming crazy man, and I'm the lighting crazy man. So I've got like, I think 6 lights if I were to turn them all on here, and that's just way overkill. You don't need all that, believe me. But again, it goes back to what I was saying. It's about solving a problem, not about buying equipment.
But my thing too is, I don't have a set, right? I don't do a lot on camera. So
Right.
I'm not trying to configure a set. This is a production environment. And so I don't typically like kind of go all this crazy with the lights when I'm doing production work. But I do try to have, when I'm dealing with clients for streaming jobs and virtual productions, I do try to have a good setup. So I do try to have good, I don't always, put the blue light and the orange light on. A lot of times I'll just go in the other room back there and I'll turn the overhead lights on, which are tungsten. So they're going to be orange to begin with. Right. So like the lights that I have in front of me, I'll set those for a daylight temperature, like 5,200 or a little higher, so that they're more blue. I'll let the tungsten light in the background go more orange. And I try to set a good example for my clients, because when I start talking to them about trying to change their camera position, about trying to get them to add some supplementary lighting, I want to use a little peer pressure, right? So if I look good and I sound good, it's more encouraging to them to do the same thing.
And can you repeat that, Greg? Can you repeat that again? If you look good and you sound good, it's more encouraging to them.
Exactly. And and as we've heard Alex say, recently, when you look good, you don't have to be Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, right? If you have good lighting and you have good camera technique and composition and you sound good, if you come into a panel with another group of people and you look good and you sound good, you automatically become one of the most authoritative people in that room as perceived by the audience. And look, let's face it, perception is everything. It doesn't matter whether you're the smartest person or not.
Right here, this is only perception. You don't know what's going on out anywhere else.
Exactly. So like I said, you don't have to be Angelina Jolie or Brad Pitt. Just have good camera technique, get your camera elevated, eye level, have some good lighting on. Automatically, you are going to be an authority when you come on camera.
Well, and that's a great point, because that is, whether you like my setup or not, I don't know. The difference is, though, if I'm teaching lighting and I'm teaching photography to people, I felt I had to have at least a great representation of how this works. Otherwise, there's no credibility.
With those lava lamps back there, I wonder if there's like a velour sofa and some Barry White music going on in the background.
Smooth jazz.
And incense, too.
Brotherly love in the afternoon. Yeah. So, yeah, this one of these is a real live 1970s. This one right here is a 1970s lava light. So I don't know where it came from, but I got it from somewhere. So anyway, go ahead, Leo.
I have exactly the same. I have to deal with politicians as well as others. And when I have to sit there and explain to them why I can't hear them, why I can't see them, why they actually, even the simplest thing is like, could you please clean that camera that's on the top of your laptop with a cloth, because it's just covered in grease. And that's the first thing. It's like, but I spend all my time saying, you've got to look good and you've got to sound good. And exactly as Greg is saying, if I look poor or I don't sound that great, it's gonna, it just degrades my opportunity to explain that to somebody.
Well, I think one of the Jeff said it about, if I'm not mistaken, about the 3-piece suit. I think that was a great analogy. We used to dress to match our client. Now things have changed over the last 10 years or so. We dress down, but still, it's the same thing. If I'm going to present myself to them over online, I should at least represent myself in the best possible light, no pun intended, and look like I know what I'm doing, whether I do or not. Is John talking? He's muted, or is he just? I saw his mouth moving.
You saw my mouth moving. That's when you know a politician is lying. I was just saying, was Leo saying that the politicians look fuzzy and needed to be washed down? But I just wanted to know whether it's a political comment. And Craig, I love you being red, white, and blue. That's really representing Washington, D.C. there.
Yeah. So that's pretty much about it. I mean, I can go into a whole bunch of other stuff. So I don't know if you guys know or not, but I do a Friday night show every Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern on Facebook and YouTube. And really it's targeted toward new photographers and helping educate them. I don't go in anywhere near this kind of detail that I've done here. Of course, at this level, because new photographers, it's not the kind of stuff they're interested in. But, and I go and I answer questions live and stuff like that, and be able to just help encourage and educate new photographers, because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there that drives me crazy. People repeating the same stuff over and over that's not true. It's based on, myth or stuff they read, not stuff they actually have done in real world. So anyway, so I guess now it's time for questions, comments, and snide remarks.
We've already been bringing the snide remarks, I thought, all night. We've been doing
Oh no, you guys were just getting warmed up. I thought we were going to have some real zingers. I know Greg could come up with a couple.
Yeah, like I said, I knew this was going to be a fun show with this panel. Omar, do we have any questions in the queue?
Hey, Omar.
Yeah, sorry, I was in the wrong window here. So we have a couple questions that came in. I actually put one in at the beginning of this just to get one kind of started here, and then a few came in afterwards that I thought were actually way better than mine. But I'll start off with this one. Would it be a good trick for the at-home zoom operator when seeing hard lights, like kind of like what the example you did here with Adam here, to try and bounce them off their walls? And can you dive into that a little bit more with some examples of other ways? It's someone who's in my mind, like a Zoom operator who's trying to help that presenter who's, not knowledgeable in what we're doing here to use what they have within their environment to make them look better. I like that idea you gave with the bouncing, like that lamp or whatever off of a white surface or something like that. And then the note of, by the way, if it's a colored surface, you might not want to do that because you'll get these color effects, which then Ed touched on. I was wondering if there's any other kind of little tricks like that you can give to the audience.
One of the mistakes I see are people use window light. They think, oh, this is great. I got nice light coming from the window. The problem is, number one, that's a different color temperature than the light that you've got set up in your room. Number two, it changes. It's not consistent. So a cloud goes over, it's going to turn a different color temperature. And so you're going to start looking blue and kind of washed out. And so I'm of the belief you want to block everything out and start from scratch and then add your own lighting, and that way you have complete control over it. So if you want to, put some drapes or something up, things like that. The other mistake, of course, is people having a window behind them. Again, Greg and I talked about that. You don't want that bright background because it detracts from you, which is where you're the main subject. So the second thing then, to answer your question, would be turn off all the lighting. And then one of the things we're taught in photography is, and one of the things I teach in lighting, is start with one light. Don't turn on 5 lights and try and get them all set up. It's too complicated. Start with one light and just get that one light on yourself and get it adjusted and try and get it the best you can. Again, if you're trying to make it a little bit softer, then try and make it as big as possible. You can take a reflector or something and shine through it to make it softer. But anyway, start with that one light. Get that around. If you've got glasses, you typically have to move that up a little bit so you don't get the light in your eye or reflecting off your glasses. But start with that one light. Then you don't have to have 2 lights. If you wanted, you could just take, again, a white piece of foam core or something on a stand right here out here, and it would bounce a little bit of that light onto the other side to kind of even it out just a little bit. Then start on the background. Okay, start looking at what it looks like. How can I make that background darker but more appealing? I don't want it to be distracting. I want to, I got a lot of books or whatever I have back there. I don't want to make it, tone it down some using color or making the light lowering the lighting. So again, you probably don't want the light on overhead, because the light overhead tends to throw a lot of shadows on your face, and you don't want that. So it's not very flattering. You certainly don't want light coming from underneath. That makes you look ghoulish looking. So that's kind of how, I don't know if that answers your question. That's kind of how I'd start if you want to improve, just to get started, you get in setting up your system so it starts to and get better. The next thing I think you'd find is some kind of colored lighting in the background will always be a good idea.
Lee, how do you deal with the glasses reflection? That's been the problem I've had with the faculty when they went on Zoom.
It's a tough thing, you know. It's the you got to remember, it's like a billiard ball, right? If the light is right, if I tilt my head up, I don't know if you can see. Okay, you can now see the light in my eyes there. Okay, so it's bouncing directly at. So I have to move those up kind of high, which then throws some shadow here. But you get them up high to get that out of or the other thing is if you turn your face, when I'm photographing somebody, what I'll try to do is kind of turn their body in at an angle, and that will also help with the reflection. But it's really just a angle of incident issue where it's hitting that front of those glasses and bouncing off. So you just kind of have to look at that light angle and move it at a way either left or right. The worst thing you can do is move it straight on. That's why the ring lights don't work. So you want to move it to one side and up, and that'll typically help it.
Well, the problem we have a lot of is that the faculty members were actually using their cameras and their computer right on top of it, and they had their things very bright so they could read. So it wasn't only the lighting they had, but it was the bright backlight from the screen that really was doing a problem.
Yeah, that is a problem. That's tough.
So John, basically just you need to elevate the light above the level of the glasses. So it's just an angle thing. So you just need to elevate the light so it's above the glasses. So when you look straight ahead, you don't see it. But the problem, as you say, is the screen. So like I have 3 screens around me, and there's no way as a glasses wearer that I can get those reflections out of my glasses.
Yeah, one trick you can do, it's kind of not in photography. If you can kind of take in the back of them and tilt them up just a little bit, so it's not, that'll sometimes help because again you're trying to, but it's not easy to do and it's not easy to keep that way.
So I think Justin was trying to interject, and then I see Adam has a hand up.
No, I was actually going to follow up because I had a major nightmare with a guest speaker last week who, I mean, you couldn't see her eyes. It was nothing but screen reflection and trying to get control. I mean, for me, I can at least see my eyes, but, well, I've got enough, up side light that I buy the shiny spot as a trade-off. So I'm just trying to figure out survival tricks when the speaker comes in like that and you lose their eyes to their glasses.
Well, again, if you can tilt that monitor at an angle or down or up, sometimes that can help. Typically, it'd probably be tilting it down, or the top of it down. So if you tilt it up, it's probably going to be worse. But if you can get them to tilt a little bit, that might help a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in several situations over the years where you just have to be in survival mode, right? You talked about it earlier. Use what you've got. I mean, I've had Walmart white bags stretched over the lights. They're cool burning LEDs, so they're not going to melt. But they're just, and I don't try to stretch them out. I let them stay wrinkled, and so it throws the light in a lot of different directions. We'll take a small cutout, like a lamp is often a 360 device, right? And so it emits light all the way around. So I'll take a small cutout and block the light on my side, but then put the big whiteboard behind it so that it's bouncing off that big board towards me. I mean, and it's just, sometimes it's arts and crafts stuff that doesn't show on the camera, but it manipulates that light. And fact of the matter is in photography, lighting is by far, I think, the hardest science to true lighting is the hardest science to really get a hold of well, especially studio-based lighting.
Well, Jeff, it may make you feel good to know that there's something called a China ball. And a China ball, and so you basically have taken and made a Walmart China ball by putting the bag over it, and that's essentially the same thing. So that's and that's all part of understanding how light works and how to modify it. And when I teach lighting, I start with a Home Depot shop light. And I show people how to use that. Then I take a speed light, or off-camera speed light. And then I take a $2,000 Pro photo light. And you can make it all look the same if you understand how light works and how to modify it.
I'll just before we get to Adam because he has his hand up. The arts and crafts comment that Jeff just made. My wife the other day, I asked her. This is it's like a spandex material, you know. I asked her to pick some up so that I can soften some of my lights. So I'm doing some arts and crafts to try to improve because as Justin had also pointed out, you know, I get a little bit of the you can tell where my lighting is coming and hitting. So I want to try to soften it up. So yeah, there's and to Lee's point that he just said too, these are Home Depot special lights that I'm using right now. They're dimmable LEDs, but in Home Depot reflectors. So yeah, a lot can be done with very little. And
well,
then,
I think if we were ever on set of a movie, I think we'd all be shocked at how they make things happen and, you know, wire stuff together.
Yeah, absolutely. Adam, you've had your hand up for a little bit. We want to make sure we recognize you.
Yeah, my hand's hurting a little bit, but okay. Just to say, to vouch for what Lee said about the background, especially when doing a window. The only way to do it is ND gels, correctly?
Could be. What's your camera that you have?
I'm usually actually a laptop from work.
Okay.
So I'm not really, I don't have any special cameras right now, but this is only for only once in a while, but you know, for what I have, I probably
So typically what you would do, now you can't do it on a laptop, it's really difficult, but on any other camera, what you would do is you would close the aperture down or change the ISO so it's darker. Then that's going to make your background darker. So you start with that. So you go, okay, now I got my background the way I want. Now I know how much light I need to add to the foreground to bring my exposure up so that it's properly exposed. So because you can't do that, though, you don't have any limit. You have to. There's some other tricks you have to do, and that would be trying to figure out. Now, do you have an overhead light on? And what other light do you have on in the room?
I only have, so there's no overhead in here. So I just only have the light in front of me that I actually have it has an arm to it. So I have that in front of me. And then I have a gooseneck light right over here. And then I also have one with an arm on the other side of the room, which is off because I'm not.
So pretty well lit room for only having a laptop camera.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just the reason I said about the ND. I from experience, I've done interviews for movies, for doing. I had to install an ND on a window. That was fun.
Did Greg have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, Ed made a good point when he's talking about, trying to find reflectors in along that line. Lighting doesn't have to be, anything super fancy or expensive. I mean, you can go to Home Depot and get, very inexpensive fluorescent bulbs or light fixtures that'll work. And also, like, if you do a lot of virtual stuff, you can also learn how to use your computer screens as reflectors as well. So, for example, I just mentioned a while ago that I have 3 screens around me. I can't get rid of the reflections out of my glasses. But one thing that I did when I came in here was I put a white window up on the screen to my right here. And so if I take that screen off, you can see how it changes the lighting on my face. And so I'm just using, this is just like a Microsoft Outlook, like an email, like a blank email window. And so I'm using that as just a fill for my face. And so you can see, like, when I take that off, just the difference that having that little bit makes.
Cool. I actually, the other day, I changed one of my Windows machines with I have 2 monitors and a big, 24-inch over here. It had just the standard blue Windows background, and I was on a vMix call with somebody, but I was just ancillary. I wasn't the caller. I was just helping do some tech checks. So it got to the point where I could kind of hang out, and I turned my lighting off, and I couldn't believe how much lighting was coming off of my monitors and how blue I looked once I didn't have, because I had that blue Windows background. So I changed it to a black background, solid on that desktop, and it made the world of difference on that.
When they started calling you Smurf, you didn't pick up on that?
Well, thankfully, my these 52K lights are bright enough that they were, that it wasn't really they're overpowering a bit. But something you mentioned earlier about the sunlight, and the reason I went these 52Ks was because I do have a window to my left over here, and right now I have it covered with a sheet. But when I first started being on Brian Maddox's Audio Opinion show, my room was laid out much differently, and I would sit at that table, and at the right time of day, the sun would come in, and like one side of my face would be very lit up, and then I was trying to find another light to balance it, and I didn't have anything that was equal. So I said, hey, let me get lights that are closer to sunlight so that if I do have this window open, or if we're not, I didn't know if my wife was going to let me keep a sheet over, a big window in our kitchen, because my studio is half my kitchen, which you guys probably wouldn't know if I didn't say it. But I didn't want my camera white balance to be off if I did have natural sunlight coming in. So I figured I would get lighting that I could white balance to that would be close enough, so you don't have, like what you were saying earlier, that change in white balance.
And for those of you that are a little more sophisticated, you're using vMix or something like that. One thing that I do every time before I start is I use this gray card, and I'll take a picture of this, and then I go into vMix, and I don't know if you guys know or not, but there's a way to go in there. You can set an auto white balance. You click on this surface, and then it corrects all of that. Now, if you have mixed lighting conditions, it's a little harder, but it is a good way to make sure your camera is at least as close as possible.
Yeah, so Peter Malone on YouTube asked about white balancing, and not that I'm, an expert at this, but I've had some experience. I know that when I'm in complete control of my lighting, and everything in my office studio right now is outputting at 5600K, I can set my camera at 5600K. I don't have to sense it and tell it to auto white balance and so forth. But when I'm at the church and there's lights I have zero control over, and they're all house lights, and that's when I hold up a big card in front of the camera and zoom in on it, and it's like a PTZ camera, and tell it to auto white balance, and it picks up those conditions that I don't have control of but are still being delivered to the environment. So it does auto white balance itself with I use a white card in that room in particular, but yeah, I think it's pretty critical.
Well, something I learned in photography, it may not be, it could apply in video, but and that is an accurate white balance is not all, and this is not related to your comment, Jeff, but an accurate white balance is not always preferred. What I found is sometimes I'll get a super accurate white balance, I'll hit that eyedropper, and it gets right on the money, and it looks awful. It looks too sterile. So sometimes you want to deviate from that a little bit because, you got skin tones. Like sometimes there are people I'm photographing and I want to warm them up just a little bit. Now you can do this in post, but if you go to cloudy on your camera and shoot with that, then it will actually automatically warm up the skin tones a little bit. So an accurate white balance is great, and it's good to have a reference, but also you may want to be able to adjust that from time to time.
Iris, you had a question?
I was just going to say that having been the person on the movie set who has to improvise with no money, one thing that's great with a reflector is those disposable rings for your stove that you're supposed to stick under the burners that you could just throw out instead of the metal ones that come with the stove. If you put a piece of tinfoil over the center part so there's not as big a hole, you suddenly have a reflector.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about a reflector is never going to be overexposed because a reflector is bouncing the light, so it's always going to be less than the source because you got light fall off. So you're always going to have, it's going to be a lot easier to deal with than actually sometimes adding another light, because now you got that light you can go too high or too low, but with a reflector, it's almost always right.
Also, low budget solutions. Sometimes you have no money, you have no budget, you're just winging it.
That's the name of the game, though. That's the way it works. My theory is you never have enough time, you never have enough money, you never have gear. That's always the way it works. And not even on the biggest projects. And, the one I like to reference the most is Jaws. That thing was it had all kinds of problems. The shark failed. They had problems on the water. Spielberg thought he was going to get fired every day. And look, that thing launched his career because they made it work given what they had. And that's the job.
Well, on Broadway, the Titanic wouldn't sink. They had to redo the entire thing because the ship refused to sink.
Wow. They wish.
So I want to come back in there. Geronimo Tarif had said something on the Facebook side. What is your preferred frame rate to set your camera for use for Zoom, Teams, Google Meets, and others?
Oh, great question. Your frame rate should always be double the frame. Your shutter speed should always be double the frame rate of your camera. So if you're shooting at 24 frames a second, then you want to be your aperture, or excuse me, your shutter speed should always be about 1 over 50. If it's 30 frames a second, if it's 30 frames a second, then you want to be at 1/60th of your shutter. So that's all, and then that's something you can't really change per se. You can just a little bit, but you don't want to. So that's a limitation of video, because in photography we have that ability to change the aperture, the shutter speed, and the ISO. But in video, you kind of have to lock that shutter speed down based on the frame rate.
Well, and it brings up another thought in issues I've had in the past as well, is when you buy, I don't know if I'm absolutely right in saying cheap, but maybe cheap non-professional LED lighting. They have frequencies at which they refresh and throw light, and it can, if you, let's say it's at 60 hertz and you're not shooting at 60 frames a second or whatnot, you can end up getting lines across your video and so forth, or flashing down a screen or a monitor because it's out of sync. Your camera is, I believe it's your camera shutter is refreshing faster than the entire cycle of the emitter, if you will.
Yeah, and you'll find that as you dim lighting too. On some LED lighting, as you dim it, it gets to be a problem because they're changing the refresh rate. Go ahead, Omar. What else you got?
Actually, it's my turn.
Sorry.
Thank you so much. There's so much positive feedback on Facebook and YouTube and here in Zoom. Feel free, if anyone listening hasn't already told us what camera you're using, feel free to add a comment. Did we ask this one for Ed actually already?
Nope, I don't think so.
You mentioned you have a key light on your green screen. What does it mean if you have a light focused on your green screen that adds to a bright spot to that image?
Okay, I see Chris asked this. So yes, I do have, I have 2 lights actually that are aimed on my green screen. So what I can do is and I'm using the keying here in Zoom actually, which is even more kind of remarkable. So that's my green screen. So you can see that there's 2 kind of hotter spots, but the key to having a green screen or for effective green screening is to have even lighting on it. What I can do actually, I can move my webcam so you can see. As I mentioned, my walls are very red, and this is my homemade green screen. I put some, side hangers over top, and I have those 2 Home Depot lights with the same 56K or 52K dimmable LEDs in them, and I can adjust the lighting. I have just these little inline dimmers. So this one's actually my front lighting, but I can raise my green screen lighting or lower my green screen lighting or turn it off. And then when I bring my keying back in, you'll see when I bring my virtual background back. So if I take out my light, it's actually not. So if I kill all my light, this is terrible. And all you're seeing is the light off my computer screens right now. So, but as I bring my key light up, it allows that green screening to actually work. I've also found here in Zoom, so if you're using your virtual backgrounds and you have a green screen, I just turned my front light back on. What I do when I set my virtual background, and there's a little color picker in the menu. Once you say you have a green screen, you get a little color picker. On a Mac, it ends up being a little tiny box in the bottom right of your preview screen in that that menu. On a PC, it's all the way at the bottom. There's a little box where you can check it, and then you can pick on your preview where you want to take your the color from. Because Zoom will do this on any solid background. It doesn't have to necessarily be a green screen. If you have a yellow wall, you could, as long as it's kind of solid and well lit. But I tend to pick the darkest spot, which usually for me is this spot down here is pretty dark, or sometimes I get a little shadow on this side. And when I color pick that, it makes the whole thing look much better. If I pick a hot spot where like that light was, then the bottoms will get that kind of, actually I can do that. I'll show you.
All sparkly.
Yeah, so if I pick a hot spot, now I might have a lot of light on, and I dull my light a little bit. Let's see if we get it. No, I'm getting too much front light. Let me see. Trying to make the key not look good. So you can see what it's doing now because I turned the light off. But the keying doesn't work so well if I pick a very bright spot. Actually, here.
You just have a great setup, Ed. No matter what you do, it looks good.
Well, I spent a lot of time. Okay, so now I'm getting some. You see it in the bottom corners. Yeah, I had to like really juice my lights up, pick a very hot spot. So you get kind of like the whole tearing, and it doesn't look so good until I bring my lights back up. So when I do my color picking, I kind of get my light where I think it looks pretty even-ish, but then I'll find whatever the darkest spot, which for me is usually in my lower corners because I'm lighting from above, not lighting from below. I'll pick that color, and now my key looks pretty good. Right now, all my front light is off at the moment, and then I can bring my front light back up.
But how far are you from that wall, Ed?
About 3.5 feet. So if I, like, right now, I'm touching the wall right now.
Okay. Yeah, because that's one of the things that you got to watch out for is you get reflection off that green we were talking about earlier. As Greg was talking about, you get a colored surface behind you, and then that'll put a little halo around your chroma key because it's reflecting back on your back of your.
Yeah. So not really by design, just kind of by the nature of these Home Depot lights and how they throw. They also kind of give me some shoulder and hair light because they're pretty wide flood as opposed to being pin spotty. So that helps with some of that separation is to have that light, a hair light. Lee, you showed me your lighting setup. Do you mind? And I saw somebody had asked a question about, if you could turn your light on. Can you show us what your lights look like?
All right. So this is without any lighting except the backlight. This is a backlight that I have to kind of give me a little bit of separation from the background. Then this is the fill light, which I have over here on this side. And as you can see, it's lower than this light over here, which should be brighter. So this just adds a little bit of fill just to kind of, bring up. So those are the 3 lights that I'm using right now, unless I'm using chroma key, and then I have 2 more lights just for the chroma key.
Right.
What did you do to get that really cool, like hulking green, like that we just saw in the program feed?
Oh, did that do it on mine? I've seen that before, and I've
did
seen
it right
people,
when I pinned them on my screen.
I've heard people
weird.
talk about Zoom doing that.
Yeah, it was.
This is the guy that doesn't want to be identified, on 2020. I can modify my voice and everything. So let me tell you, it's a lot of experimenting. And I can sit here and tell you how to do it all day long, but then when you actually start applying it, you got to move things around. You got to try them. I'm always moving things around. I'm always trying things. I'm always making adjustments. And it's an ever, ending kind of tweak. I think I'm at the point where I'm tired of tweaking, but still, it's just the way lighting works. You just kind of have to keep adding and moving things around, trying things, see what works for your environment.
I have to say, Ed, I was really impressed when you reached back and you were pointing your green screen. It really looked like you were ready to move a fader. Try it again, right now.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, let's see.
Okay. Patch us in there, Ed.
Yeah, let's take a look at that. So let's see.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's great.
I was actually saying, Ed, can you pull those faders down? But I was on mute when I did it. So
that's terrific.
Well, I think that's what you have to do to be able to really pull off a green screen. So many of them are out of the angle or proportion. But that looked pretty good. You did that. Is that really a green screen?
Yeah, Leo, before you ask your question, the thing about Ed's, someone I think mentioned before earlier about why don't you have it out of focus. I think it works in focus. And the reason is because the lighting and the perception and the perspective gives it depth. And that's what you're going for. And that's kind of what I was talking about before. It's not just about being out of focus. It's creating a perspective or creating an image or telling a story. And I think Ed's works perfectly because he's got leading lines that come in from the side that bring right to the center. You got the speakers over there. And so the fact that everything is in focus makes it look very realistic.
Again, just dumb luck. Just dumb luck on my part. So we had a question from Chris Sego. I missed the first 30 minutes. Sorry. Did Greg G say what type of camera he's using?
Some crummy Sony A9.
Yeah, it's a Sony A9 II. And typically, I don't use the A9 II unless I'm actually going to be on camera, which is rare. So typically, I'm in a production environment. And usually, I would have like an A7R3. When I'm on camera, I use the A9 II because the Sonys have this phenomenal eye autofocus, and the A9 II, the eye autofocus works particularly well with glasses. And so, like, I can move. Now, this lens is at f1.4, so we're talking about a razor thin amount of depth of field here. And if I move, this camera does a phenomenal job of tracking my eyes and staying in focus. Whereas the A7R3 doesn't have quite as good autofocus, and it doesn't do that as well.
That's a pretty good garage sale find, Greg.
Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah, I think, and that didn't come from Micro Center either.
But just going back to that, we're talking about webcams, but also, like, what are some less expensive ways that people can get a nice camera and a lens? And being a Sony guy, the A6100 or the 6000 series of cameras are pretty nice cameras, and you compare that with like a Sigma 16 millimeter f1.4 lens, and even though the A6000 series is an APS-C, so it's a smaller sensor, so it's not going the focal lengths aren't going to translate the same way that they would on a full frame camera. So a 16 millimeter lens on an APS-C camera is going to be comparable to what, like, maybe a 24 millimeter lens on a full frame camera would look like. But if you could take that A6100 and put that Sigma 16 millimeter f1.4 lens on it and put it on a little stand on your desk, it's going to be fairly close to you. It's going to be somewhat wide, but it's not going to be really distorted. And with that f1.4 depth of field, it's still going to give you a little bit of that bokeh, and that, I hate that term, but bokeh dude. And it's going to knock your background out of focus and kind of give you that really cool depth look. And so that camera is about, I want to say, like $600, and the lens is like $400. So it's somewhere in like that $1,000 to $1,200 range. You can get a really nice camera and lens combination that's going to give you like a, give you like that shallow depth of field look.
Hey, Leo, you had a question earlier. Did we answer it, or did you just give up?
It's no, it's okay. I was just going to say I've been experimenting with these Pavo light tubes. So I've just Velcro it onto the back of the seat. If I just turn off
that's
my
a cool
overhead,
idea.
If I turn off my overhead, you'll see it even more.
Oh,
and it comes right up. And because so it sits there in the halos behind me to some extent. Although some people think I've got a natural halo, but the nice thing with them is that they're completely. If I can actually focus with my eyes,
so I figured that's the headphones covered up the horns.
Yeah, exactly. So if I change the focus, obviously I can just go completely change, so I can now be green. So you'll see
that's pretty cool.
That's gone. I'm now in a green environment.
What do those things run cost-wise?
About $85. Off the top of my head. And there is a thing, I haven't worked out how to do it, but you can actually get a USB, and they're all controllable by your phone, so you can link them all together.
Yeah, see, that's
the
a real
sixes.
nice low-cost solution for throwing some light on the background, being able to have RGB control of it.
Yeah, and they obviously you can change the Kelvin as well as the color, so you can do both the color and the white balance on it.
Yeah. Comparatively speaking, I similar results, right? In flexibility is the Pixel G1.
Yeah.
And all the flexibility of brightness and RGB but did you add the Velcro, Leo, or did it come
If
that way?
you,
This is
it was a
quarter
discussion.
20,
It was a discussion on office hours yesterday as to which side do you put the Velcro on, whether you put the Velcro onto the light or onto the chair.
That's funny.
It went on for a reasonable amount of time, but actually the hooks are on the chair, and the and the Velcro, the fluffy bit is on the light, so I can put it on anywhere. It lasts about 3 hours.
Always the sticky on the light.
Well,
always the sticky. I go the opposite, so that way, anytime you find carpet, thunk. There it is.
Yeah, we went through this. Apparently NASA don't agree with you, Jeff.
Well,
So,
it's okay. They're right down the road from me, and I told them they're wrong.
Did they listen, Jeff?
No.
They should.
But the good thing with this, I'm running this this is only at 20% brightness at the moment, and this will last for about 4 hours at 20%. So it lasts a reasonable amount of time.
Isn't it absolutely amazing what technology has brought us in these times? When you think about the lights, I've got LED panels sitting in my warehouse that I would normally use in a studio situation. I elected not to, and I've got similar type lights, but they're just LED panel, little smaller LED panels running off of batteries here in my little desk studio space, and it was like a total whopping of like maybe $250 or something like that.
Yeah, these are great.
Amazing.
Leo, if I'm sorry to interrupt you, what was the name of the lights? Can you?
Is it Pavo? Is that the right? Hold on. They're Nan lights. They're Nan light is the actual make. Nan light, and it's I think Nan light, NANLITE, and it's called a Pavo tube, and I think this is the 6. Which probably makes sense. It looks like
that's a good look for you there, Liam.
Yeah, I know. But they're as I say, they're completely controllable. And if you're really into going mad, you can turn them on the effects, and then you can. It'll do. This is this is the TV effect. So, and then you can get. If I go police car effect and everything, you can see.
There we go.
Yeah, so you can really go mad with them. But they're pretty good, I think, and relatively, and as I say, you can actually, because they're controllable USB, you can control them over wireless. You can actually have 4 of them, and you can control the lot together.
So I just want to jump in real quick, guys. It is 8:44 right now, so we're getting to that 15-minute mark. I want to be able to get it to our positive feedback and everything. There's a couple more questions here. I know Ed's got one more, and then we can keep going down the line if you want to continue on that, Lee.
Yeah, so I'll ask.
What do you guys want to do?
Great. So Peter Malone asked, should you white balance while testing your light setup?
Well, yes. I'd say start with one light and then white balance against that, and then don't keep white balancing. I mean, because you can, but what's going to happen is now you're not going to have a reference when you mix the two lights together if they're not the same color temperature. So I'd say start with one light, white balance, use that as a reference, and then go from there. Like I said, this camera is a little quirky that I'm using, so sometimes I don't know if it's always nails the white balance, so that's why I white balance every time before I'm going to use it. But normally you don't have to do that. These cameras have gotten really, really good with white balance and looking at accuracy. They used to be awful, but over the years they've really improved.
Got it. I think Omar has the next question.
Yeah, so Pete from YouTube's asks, I want to know how to reduce the white glare from the 3 computer screens, is his question.
So there are a couple things you can do. One is I would tilt the screen, the top of the screen towards you, so it's more of an angle. The other thing you can do is they make these security displays, like a polarizing screen you can put up over the screen so no one can see it. It changes the angle that you can see the screen from. That'll knock down some of the light. That would be the other thing you could do to keep some of the glare off from the screen.
You can do like, dark gray to black background wallpapers, the digital wallpapers as well. And as well, most operating systems and software packages have dark modes as well. So
That's a
when
good
you know
point.
you're going to be on camera is to switch to dark mode so that you don't have just these large white, windows open, and they're big light sources.
My problem is then I can't see and I'm going like this. It's an age thing.
This is probably not going to affect most people on this panel or watching, but the default for a Mac is 60 hertz output, which really causes us a lot of problems in Europe because all of our equipment is at 50 hertz. So what you end up seeing, when I had to get special software that you can install on your Mac to change it, but I was getting like a fluttering on the bottom of my neck because I get the light spill from the screen. It's like it causes a flutter.
That's good to know. I never knew that.
There's a plug-in, there's an add-on to a Mac called Switch Res X. And if you get that, you can control exactly what a Mac does on its monitor. But without it, it just will keep on trying to fix the default settings.
So the next question I got here is from David Brady. Traditional light meters use lux and or foot candles as their measurements. How do those line up to color?
They don't. You need a color meter, which I have over here somewhere, which will measure in Kelvin. So they have no reference as far as color temperature. They're only going to measure the amount of light, which is a great way to look at your light and to check your balance, by the way. So you can start with that key light, get a reading that way, and then check in the other light and make sure. So what if you want something that's like, if you don't want the flat lighting, you want one light to be whatever the setting is going to be, and then this one the fill light should be, I like to have it about a half a stop lower. And so that's one way to do it. And the other nice thing about a light meter is you can reproduce that. So if you change, you write those settings down and you change and you mess, let's see how this works, let's see how, you can always get back to where you were by using a light meter as opposed to just guessing. Because you look at these monitors and all these monitors are different. They're not really calibrated. Even if you calibrate them, they're not quite right. So a light meter is going to give you a much more accurate reading and much more reproducible reading.
Let's see, what do we have next?
All right, gentlemen, I'll say the next one. So Joe Zahitis, kind of sounds like a mojito or something. Didn't we find that green screen issue with it was a graphics driver that NVIDIA fixed with a recent GPU update? I know a recent driver update fixed it for me.
So is it a tearing issue? Is that, I wonder what what problem he was having. I know there was a release of a new NVIDIA driver.
I think he's talking about when I pinned you on my monitor, it halted you. And
that's right.
Are you using vMix, Lee?
Yes, I am.
And are you using NDI to get your video over to Zoom?
No.
How's it getting over? How's it getting into Zoom from vMix?
Magic.
It was in the program feed, so it's probably Ed.
Yeah. I just use the the vMix driver or whatever you want to call it.
The external button. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think historically it's been, I think there were, multiple parties who responded to it, which was in NDI, but also NVIDIA had an update as well. And I dealt with it a lot, actually. I got picked on a ton there were two, like this deep green Hulk screen and then this, what colors were they? Orange and something, Greg, that used to have this overlaid offset image.
Yeah, you would get that red. It was kind of reddish. Yeah.
Reddish orange. Yeah. So, but I will occasionally I'll still run it, and that's why I've actually stopped using NDI out of vMix versus the external button that streamlines it to being a webcam.
Why would you use NDI over the external button?
Because it's more flexible and you can send it multiple places. Don't get me started, man.
Well, if it's on the same computer,
absolutely,
I guess.
still use NDI. Even on the same computer, you still can. The reason that vMix has a problem is because they didn't update their DLL. They didn't update the actual core part of NDI from 23 up until 24.
So did 24 update it, Jeff?
24 finally
it is
updated
current
it, yeah.
if you're on 24.
Okay, I am on 24.
They were way behind. It took a long time to figure this out. They were way behind, and they shouldn't have been. They were on 4.2, and 4.6 was out for 4.5 was out for quite a while. Then 4.6 came out and was out even longer, and that's what we're currently at right now is 4.6 with 5.0 due to come.
So, being where our propellers are spinning here and we got geeky questions, let me ask one. An NDI driver, there's two NDI drivers. There's a gaming driver and a studio driver. I was told you're supposed to use the gaming driver. Is that
No, you're not actually, you're not talking about NDI there. You're talking about NVIDIA.
No, I'm sorry. Did I say NDI? I meant NVIDIA.
NVIDIA. Studio, I find, is a bit more stable.
Studio.
Really? Okay.
Studio.
So
they don't care if it breaks. Gaming drivers, they don't care if it breaks.
The gaming drivers are updated more frequently than the studio drivers. So the gaming drivers are going to have the latest, greatest, whatever. They also may create an issue that has to get resolved in a subsequent update. Now that said, I had always heard to use the studio drivers, and so for a long time I used the studio drivers. But I heard Martin say in a vMix Fun Time show to use the gaming drivers because they get the most frequent updates.
See,
my theory is don't fix it if it isn't broken. So I lean more towards staying with the studio drivers unless there's a feature set that's something you need.
I like leading edge, not bleeding edge.
Hey, listen, I locked down my vMix machine. I use this software called Windows Update Blocker. I won't even allow Windows to do an update. I don't install anything on it. I don't want it messing any changes unless I'm doing it or I know what it's going to do because, man, it'll break things quicker and you know what to say.
Well, we have gotten very far off topic. So I'm going to reel it back in because we're getting close to the end of the hour. James Walmsey, sorry, is there a recommended light meter on the market, one that can do lux and color temperature?
Look at the Sekonic light meters. They're really nice. They're low cost. There's a 308, or I think it is. It's a low cost one. I think that's the number of it. And I don't know if it does lux though. I have to look, but I know it does incident and also flash. I'm not sure which ones do lux, but you want to look into that. But they're kind of the standard in the industry, Sekonic light meters. I got like 3 of them.
What do those go for?
$200. I think $199. I think is what it sounds for. Someone $219. It's not. They're not too bad.
Disa?
Well, I'm really curious about the question that I have in my queue. It's what is bokeh? Peter Malone wants to know.
It's a type of sushi. It's a Japanese word, and it has to do with the quality. It's a great question, by the way. It's something I should have probably talked about early. It has to do. It's a Japanese word, and it has to do with the quality of the out of focus of a characteristic of a lens. So what happens is if you look at some pictures of a really tight shot of a out of focus picture, you'll see a lot of times you'll see these circles in the background of there's lights back there like Christmas lights and stuff like that. And so the shapes of those things will change based on the quality of the lens. all kinds of different attributes. And that is what's referred to as bokeh. That has to do the quality of that out of focus characteristic. It's based on the number of blades in the lens. There's a lot of things that have to do with it, the quality of the glass, but that's what they're referring to when they say bokeh. It has to do with that out of focus attribute and the quality of that out of focus attribute.
And bokeh is typically referred to in reference to a very shallow depth of field lens, because typically you're going to have more areas that are out of focus with shallow depth of field. So for example, like when you look at my background, because I am using a 1.4 lens, all that sort of out of focus area has kind of a nice bokeh to it. And that's kind of how it gets applied.
I'm also on a 1.4 lens. So the same thing.
But are you on a full frame camera, Leo?
I'm on a Panasonic Lumix GH3.
So that's a smaller sensor than that's not a full frame sensor, is it?
No, I don't think it's a full frame.
Right. So you have a little more inherent depth of field in your image. So your background is not quite as out of focus. There's not quite as much bokeh in your image because the sensor is smaller.
Yeah, I can take my hand from about here. That's in focus to about, you can watch it to go. Actually, if I use this as a reference, because you can see the writing, you can see when it comes into focus and then when it goes out of focus.
Yeah, so keep in mind, again, I mentioned this earlier, there are three things. It's not just aperture, there's also focal length. So if you have a longer lens, a longer focal length, and you back up and zoom in, you're going to get a different attribute or different level of bokeh. And then also the distance the camera is to you and the subject will also affect the bokeh. So it's not just aperture.
That's great. Thank you guys for clearing that up. I did not think that was going to be as in depth of a answer to a question. So that's great.
I still like the sushi answer best.
And bokeh is trendy. Bokeh is trendy in the pixel people forum. So.
Well, and that's kind of why I started this talking about, is it okay? Everyone wants out of focus bokeh, nice soft bokeh, but why? And that was what I was trying to get to in my presentation, was explain to it why you need that and do you need it based on what you're trying to accomplish with your image.
That's great. So I would love to take us back to our gallery, our panel for a minute, and just say, did anybody who maybe isn't a professional Pulitzer Prize winning photographer get anything out of tonight's talk, and anything that they can improve their cameras they're thinking? Disa, did you have what are your thoughts on today?
Well, apparently I need to work on my tan.
Show me a Canadian that doesn't say that, though, right?
That's funny.
You just probably would turn red if you got out in the sun. You just burn, probably.
Like a true Canadian, 2 shades, red and white.
Hey, Hoser, take off.
Anybody else on the panel have thoughts? Justin?
I'll throw one. Maybe it's a thought, maybe it's a pick on the panelist, but we've talked a couple times about, darker backgrounds, and looking around the panel, there's a variety of them. For me personally, there's enough darkness to the background. I find if I don't leave like a light on the desk, or there's actually downstairs in the dining room, there's actually an LED work light just to get a little texture from the fan on the ceiling. So I wonder if there's sort of a guideline over a good ratio for darkness background to foreground.
It's not so much a ratio, it's what I was talking about before. You want to lead the viewer where you want them to look. That's what photography is all about: composition, framing, lighting, all that stuff. So if you find that the background draws people's attention away from you, then it's not dark enough, or there's not out of focus enough, or whatever the attribute may be. That's really the trick. So you don't want people looking around going, oh, wow, look at that. There's a cable behind him. Well, what kind of thing is that back there? Because then it detracts from the subject matter. And that's really the whole key in any kind of photography or video.
Well, and I'd add dark back, like kind of a hard rule of dark background, light foreground isn't necessarily the formula. I think, like if John Idelson, for instance, had a dark shirt on tonight, his shirt would completely fall into. If I had a really dark background with my dark navy blue shirt, I'd fall into the background as well. And so, sometimes it's create the method
I need a
of
dark
how you.
background. I really need it because without it, I'm not that bright.
Oh boy!
Keep turning up the brightness, but nothing helps, John. Is that what the problem is?
You got it.
Do you call those dad jokes or professor jokes?
They're professor jokes. I'm a retired professor, so you guys get the privilege of hearing them.
That's right.
My kids are so glad that I'm doing this because then they don't get them.
That's good. But, you can change your shirt, or you can add some, hair and shoulder lights, right, to create that separation between front and back, no matter which one's really dark or light necessarily.
Well, not to get too, I know we're talking about zooming kind of a stuff here, but that's why I typically will not wear a dark shirt. If I do, I have a backlight to separate me. I also never wear anything that has lines in it because it vibrates. You get that moire looking thing. I always wear solid colors. Now, again, this is probably not most people in the kind of work they're doing, but if you're going to be on camera and you're going to be doing this all the time and you're trying to improve that, then you want to try and wear a solid color if possible and something that is contrasty to the background.
And in terms of the lighting too, it, like I was saying earlier, the real trick to it is the placement of highlights to guide the viewer's eye into the things that you want them to see. So when you think about lighting a particular scene, you want to think about what's the first thing I want a person to see. So if you're talking about a Zoom or an online type presentation, obviously you want to start with the face. So you want to light that person's face. And so that's the starting point, and then fall back from there. So you want the person's face to be the most dominant part of an image. And then what little things do you want to highlight in the background? And when I say and we talk about highlights, we're just talking about what are the bright spots, what are the kind of little grabby things that catch your eye. And so you don't like, we talk about a darker background. Well, you don't want the background to be black because you don't want it to look like the person's just in a cave or a coal mine. So you want some illumination in the background, and it becomes a balance between, how you like the foreground and how you like the background. So, so start with the things that are most important, and then add your little accents behind that to enhance that view, to enhance that image.
And I'll just point out that, John, you brightened up your background, it looks like. Would you throw some extra light on there? Is that?
Oh, I put it, this is a chroma key, so I put a different background on it. This is when you have to get the light getting gray. And so this one sort of shows my gray hair a little bit better.
Gotcha.
The problem is that, if you don't look that good, you have to do everything you can with effects. So
hence my very first slide.
One of the things I was always told was when you're getting people who are just starting, the best thing to recommend to them is don't wear white and don't wear anything too close to your skin tone. If you are a very pale person, don't wear a pale pink. If you're a very dark person, don't wear really dark colors. It gets much harder to differentiate the face and the person from the background and the clothing. And white just creates all sorts of funny lines and colors if you don't know what you're doing, and you get the zebra thing. So
these are all great tips. I hope our audience walked away with some great stuff. Omar, do you want to kind of, because we are a little bit past the hour, do you want to go through some of the feedback? And then
I've actually been gathering up as you guys have been talking here. I let it go a little past because I wanted to grab as much as I could. So I've been backtracking some stuff. I'm still kind of running through that. So Jesus is going to help me today and start that off. While I keep grabbing a couple of these little last ones I'm trying to get in there real quickly. So DJ, I'll let you take it away.
Sure, Omar, no problem. For you, anything. All right, so Greg Gibson said, wow, the new 3-piece suit, camera, lights, and audio. I'm stealing that one, Woodgrin. Sue Ann Bubax says, haha, Lee, happened to me watching his mentor, Photo Mentor Academy on YouTube. Suddenly, I saw the light. Starting to experiment as per his thoughts. Amazed us around here, LOL. Robert F. Schumacher, sorry. This is camera 101 for me, as I learned a long time ago. Your best photographers, cinematographers are also the best people to light a set. Lighting and camera work are hand in hand. Great presentation. More people stealing the three-piece suit comment. Iris, she said she learned a long time ago after too many low to no budget productions, she learned to improvise. More comments about the three-piece suit. Omar, your copy and pasting, you might want to work on that, bro. Suan Rubax says more about the three-piece suit. Oh my gosh, people it's going viral here. We got a new viral comment. Alan Pita, great video, guys. I love the storytelling. A bit about corporate video comes a long way. Keep it up. And more like really good vibes. I don't know, Omar, is there anything you want to add? Did you bring some stuff in?
Sorry, I was bringing in, I think the last one I brought in was from so David, sorry, I'm totally lost right now. So I see Peter said great event. Will Austin, thanks, good presentation. Zoe was awesome show on topic. Can you guys do it again? You guys said that, sorry. Alice, a great line designer, said when lighting a scene, always start with the most important light by itself, then add only if it enhances the scene. Andy had said I used to 3D print discs to set over my lenses to shape the box into lenses for different organizations. Fun times. David Brady said thanks, everybody, good stuff. James Wimsley said thanks, guys. I love the info. I'm about to rewatch again. The info was so good. I like that one a lot. Again, fantastic panel. Love what this channel is doing for the industry. Jason Glass, Justin's background frames him nicely. Shadows on the edge of the frame all the way around with illuminations near center behind him. And then last one I got just now is from Andy Carluccio. Was great presentation tonight.
That's great stuff. Yeah, thank you all for the positive vibes. You can learn more about Lee Love. I posted his website, photomentor.tv. So you can learn more about him and the classes he teaches about photography. And hold on, I'll spotlight that for everybody real quick.
I should also mention real quick that every Friday, or excuse me, the first Friday of every month, I do photo reviews. So that will be coming up on this Friday. So if you want, you can submit your work and we'll do a review on it, give you feedback on it. And it's done professionally, it's done anonymously. It doesn't matter how long you've been shooting or what camera or phone you shoot it with. So that'd be something if you're interested in, check out the site.
Will do. Excellent. Thanks, Lee. Everybody get your photos. And don't forget, I hope you took your before photos and that you're going to come to our Discord and post your after photos. But also, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, you should register to join us here on Zoom on the webinar, because we get here about a half hour before we go live and people are watching us, and it becomes funny how I start staring at my computer screens and it's all laughs and jokes. And then we hang out a little bit afterwards too sometimes. So come register, join us on Zoom, hang out. Or if you can stay watching on YouTube and Facebook. You'll get the same love from us, but you get a little more extra insight if you come join us here. I would love to take a moment to thank the DVE store for their continued support. No matter where you watch, whether it's on YouTube, Facebook, or here in Zoom, you're going to get it. We're delivering it in 1080p. So that comes because of the support directly of DVE store. So visit them at dvestore.com. We talked earlier about huddle cams. They sell huddle cams. They sell all sorts of cams, PTZ optics. So go check them out, dvestore.com. I posted a link in the chat on Facebook just now. So go check them out, Guy Cochran, and let them know that you heard about it from AV Tech Talks. Go pick something up. I bought my VMix license from Guy and his team. So go show them some support for supporting us, because that helps us bring content to you. That's pretty much all I got. Oh, next week, I know we talked about it briefly at the beginning of the show, but next week we start audio month. So we're going to be doing a month long of audio talks. So we had to get in the video, and this is only the second show we've done about cameras, Omar. We did the one about PTZs, and then this one. So we've done a lot between the lens and the streaming audience. So it's nice to be getting these kinds of talks in. But for the next month, we're going to be talking about what goes on between your ears and listening to audio. So I just posted a link to the Facebook event page over in the Facebook side. If one of you guys can throw it into the YouTube, and I'll throw it right here. That's the event page. We'll have a different thing each week talking about audio for the whole month of April. So with that, I think we're pretty much all set. So if our panel wants to say goodnight to our audiences on Facebook, we'll thank Lee Love, Greg Gibson, thank you as always, Jeff Widgren, Iris, Adam, Jeff Keithley, 1F Jeff for those of you who know him, Justin, Leo joining us for the first time on our panel, and John Edelson. Thank you guys so much for all your contributions. Omar, Disa as well. Thank you guys. Good night, and we'll see everyone next week. Have a good one.
Night.